you so much for joining us this afternoon. We have Senators Whitehouse, Booker, and Padilla here, and Senator Blumenthal should be joining us very shortly. Just a couple of ground rules. Each senator is going to speak for a couple of minutes about the bill. And if you'd like to ask a question after, I would ask that you please let me know in the chat. And I will call on you to ask a question and unmute yourself in the order that the requests came in. So with that, I will let Senator Whitehouse kick it off.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you particularly to Senators Booker and Blumenthal and Padilla, who are here and participating. I also want to thank Senators Hirono and Merkley and Welch and Schatz, who are all also original co-sponsors. And a double thank you to Corey, who was the original co-sponsor of our bill in the last Congress, as well as this one. We have worked hard on the Judiciary Committee on Supreme Court ethics through considerable obstruction by the right-wing billionaires and their lawyers. We have managed to get the ethics bill out of committee with the full support of all of the Judiciary Democrats, including Senator Booker and Senator Blumenthal and Senator Padilla and Senator Hirono and Senator Welch, all the committee members who are co-sponsors of this. And we're pleased to be filing this bill to address a number of structural problems at the Supreme Court. What this bill does by providing term limits for justices is several things. First, it provides fresh appointments to a damaged and captured court. Second, it reduces the opportunities for political manipulation of Supreme Court vacancies. It does the court no service to have justices say that they are nonpartisan and then choose to retire for purposes of partisan timing. Third, the bill meets a very strong public desire for reform at the court. By 65-23, a 42-point margin, the American public wants to see this court have term limits. So we meet that goal. And by the way, I think 65-23 is probably a low point. If we're able to succeed in our investigations and more facts about certain justices' misconduct becomes known, I suspect that the impetus for reforms like this will only grow. But starting with a 42-point margin is a pretty good place to be. Last, and perhaps most importantly, this bill, if passed, creates an opportunity for the court as an institution to reboot public confidence in the institution. I think it is going to be difficult for the sitting justices, many of whom have been complicit in the problems that have caused the court's standing to fall so deeply, to be the ones who lead the court out of the mess that they helped create. So this creates a moment around which people who care about the Supreme Court can rally to refresh and redeem the body. With that, let me turn it over to Senator Booker.
Senator Whitehouse, thank you so much. And I want to thank Senator Whitehouse for his extraordinary leadership on all matters relating to the Supreme Court, and as well as thank my colleagues that are on right now, Senator Padilla and Senator Blumenthal, who also are such extraordinary leaders on the Judiciary Committee in this area. I don't want to repeat things that Senator Whitehouse has said, and let me make it simple so I can get Senator Blumenthal up. But there is a real challenge of legitimacy in the Supreme Court right now. It is facing a crisis, and polling amongst the American public have shown that it's at its really unprecedented low. We must do things that are restorative to the Supreme Court's legitimacy. At a time that you see democratic erosions in too many countries across the globe, our institutions should be looked at through a clear lens of what is best for the health and strength of our institutions, not for some kind of partisan advantage. This is why I love this bill. Number one, the majority of Americans overwhelmingly, as Senator Whitehouse has said, support this action. Number two, it is something that I believe will restore people's faith in the institution and understanding that this is not some kind of haphazard gamesmanship that is deciding when a Supreme Court justice will go on or not. It actually creates fair rules of the road that an election of a president is what allows a Supreme Court justice to be put on the bench. It is a fair system. It is a popular fix, and to me, it is deeply restorative of the esteem that the court needs with which to function in its indispensable role within our society of having legitimacy in its dispensing of the ideals of justice. With that, I'm very grateful to pass on to my friend and colleague and someone, frankly, on the Judiciary Committee that I really look up to, Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you, Senator Booker. Senator Booker is a member of the Judiciary Committee that I truly look up to because he is head and shoulders above me.
That is just in height. That might be
and
1
I
inch
must
or
say,
2 inches I have more.
I must say also intellectually,
Thank you.
both graduates of the Yale Law School, and we share that much in common. And I share with Senator Whitehouse that we are both former prosecutors, both state attorneys general and U.S. attorneys. And I've argued 4 cases in the United States Supreme Court. I was a law clerk there. I have tremendous respect, even reverence for the court as an institution and for the position of justice of the Supreme Court. But I say sadly, and I never would have said it when I was a law clerk, that there are justices on this court that have degraded the institution. And I don't need to elaborate for anybody on this call how they have degraded it. I can't answer the question of why, because it seems so short-sighted, but I think it is evident that members of the court, maybe even a majority of the court, I think it is a majority of the court, believe that there should be a code of ethics and that this court is seriously off track. And that the court has reached the point that maybe the founders never thought or imagined that it would, when the public has so lost confidence in it. And its legitimacy has been so deeply and seriously questioned. But times have changed. This institution is no longer what it was. And what's needed now is not only to restore confidence and respect for the court, but also to accommodate the fact that people live a lot longer, they serve a lot longer if they're appointed for life. During good behavior wasn't necessarily designed to include the kind of behavior that we're seeing right now, because the means of conflict of interest have become so diverse. So the long and short is that I believe that term limits are an idea whose time has come. We all face it in other parts of government. In our courts in Connecticut, there is a review after a certain number of years. People have to be reappointed to the courts. Lifetime service has become simply obsolete on the United States Supreme Court. And I'll just close with this thought. I truly believe that Chief Justice Roberts is very supportive of a code of ethics. I believe he could do it. And if he showed leadership, he would. The code of ethics would diffuse a lot of the momentum, the impatience and frustration with this court. Sadly, tragically, Chief Justice Roberts is failing to exercise that leadership. And he may have encountered, I suspect he probably has, resistance from 2 members of the court, Justice Alito and Justice Thomas, who clearly have dug into a position of total intransigence when it comes to a code of ethics. But the rest of the court, I think, is on the side of reform. This effort, though, is separate and independent. Court term limits are an idea whose time has come. I believe it's fully constitutional. It avoids some of the constitutional pitfalls of other proposals. And I want to thank Senator Whitehouse for his extraordinary leadership. And I'm proud to be part of this team with Senator Booker, who is so passionate on this topic, and Senator Padilla, who has been a leader on the Judiciary Committee as well in so many areas, and I yield to him.
Right. Well, thank you. And just thrilled to be here as part of a Team Whitehouse, Team Blumenthal, Team Booker on this effort. I'll try not to be too repetitive of what my colleagues who have articulately said already. But I think let me start with this. Senator Whitehouse keeps reminding us of the popularity of the proposal. And to his point, it's only going to get more and more popular from here as we hear more and more of the ethics concerns with some certain Supreme Court justices at the moment. But I think the popularity of the proposal is simply indicative of the lack of confidence in the court right now. And it's not just because of the ethics discussion and the work that needs to be done in that space, but clearly the public, increasingly publicly understood political decades-long effort to stack the Supreme Court. And so when we see the outcomes, the decisions of the court that are in this day and age taking away fundamental rights that we've taken for that we established 50 years ago, people want to know why. And it doesn't take long to figure out the political dynamics that have led to the court as it exists today, undermining public confidence in the court and in the judiciary, and it cannot stand. And so we have put forward a straightforward proposal to normalize the process, to mitigate and extract the politicization of the Supreme Court. I mean, the most recent examples, you all know it, when Merrick Garland doesn't even get a hearing, let alone a confirmation vote. That's a political thumb on the scale. Yet that's soon thereafter followed by a rush to confirm a Supreme Court justice just before a presidential election. It's unconscionable. The American people deserve better. This measure, the balanced, thoughtful, tremendous proposal that we're talking about here will normalize that process, remove the politicization of the court, and restore the public confidence in the Supreme Court that is so necessary. So the last thing I'd say is I wish I could say this is timely. Simply, it's overdue. And with that, send it back to Senator Whitehouse and thank him again for being our team captain on this.
So we have
with that, you're up, Megan, to manage the Q&A.
Yes. Just a reminder to let me know if you want to ask a question in the chat. Right now, we just have one request. Brian Crandall, if you can unmute, you can ask your question.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, senators. Senator Whitehouse, do you expect any bipartisan support, or, you know, the argument from the other side is going to be you're proposing this because things haven't gone your way, whether it's with decisions or the Merrick Garland situation? You know, what's the counter to this is sour grapes because the decisions haven't gone the way Democrats want in recent years?
I think if the only evidence of problems at the court was the decisions weren't going in one particular way, that would be, I think, a question of some concern. I think if every decision by certain justices goes the way of one particular political party every time, predictably, that actually is a bit of a problem in terms of the integrity of the court. But that's not where this ends. This also goes back to the Federalist Society having selected the nominees while taking huge anonymous contributions. And frankly, not even the Federalist Society. Actually, it was a backroom deal with Leonard Leo and the billionaires. There's no actual record of Federalist Society proceedings to create the list. And you look at all the ad money that was spent, raised secretly in huge denominations to get these justices onto the court. And you look at the flotillas of front groups that come in as amici curiae, funded by the same billionaires who helped get the justice on the court, and dispensing advice to the justices as to how they're supposed to rule. You add all that to the fact that the rulings are coming down almost uniformly in the direction of one group of special interests. I think there's a lot more here going on than just sour grapes. I think there's a real integrity problem at the court. And I think that's what the public is picking up on when 18% of Americans are have a great deal of confidence in the court, and 36% of Americans have hardly any.
Can I add a word, Sheldon?
Sure.
You folks on this call are very familiar with the history of the court, and you don't have to have too much familiarity with the history of the court to remember a time when justices were picked on a standard of excellence. They weren't picked basically for their political views. They were not picked if they were, let me put it bluntly, they weren't picked because they were young, so they could last for years and years and years. In fact, Supreme Court justices were supposed to be seasoned, experienced litigators or judges. And the idea of picking someone in his or her 40s and now 30s for the federal bench would have been unheard of. So I think the entire approach to Supreme Court appointees has changed to transform it into a purely political body. It's another political body now. Judges are politicians in robes. And like all of us who are politicians, we don't serve for life. We have term limits, as they say. Our term limits are every election where we are up for re-election. I'm not suggesting judges should be elected. In fact, I think in the states where it happens, it's even more politicized. But at least some term limits, I think, is appropriate. Put aside the results of the present process. The process itself undermines confidence in the Supreme Court because these lifetime appointments, in effect, solidify a court of a certain political bent that is purposely put in place.
Okay, next up we have Michael Magagnone.
Thank you, Alex.
Hi, thank you for holding this call. I wanted to ask, how are you going to respond to your Republican colleagues who object that this bill kind of effectively targets Justices Thomas and Alito as the first to sort of be not put on senior status, but out of the most recent 9 following the 2025, the 2024 election? How are you going to respond to, that Republican criticism?
Well, if you are trying to move from an endless life tenure to an 18-year term, and the purpose is to regularize and reduce the amount of time that a justice spends sitting on the court, you would naturally start with those who have been on the court the longest. So it seems to me that when you understand the purpose of the statute, that is just the obvious, almost arithmetic outcome.
Okay, next up we have Jess from the Wall Street Journal.
Hi, thanks for doing this call, senators. One, I'd just like to re-up the previous question about the whether there's any potential for any bipartisan interest and what the practical odds you acknowledge for passing this might be, and secondly, what is to stop, say, the Senate from refusing to confirm justices, or it doesn't seem to address the Senate's role in Supreme Court nominations and confirmations.
You're correct as to the latter. We focus on the executive appointment role, and that's a pretty big bite to take. So I'm quite satisfied that this is a sensible piece of legislation and it's scaled properly. As to the role of bipartisanship, you will likely have witnessed around the ethics bill in the Judiciary Committee two things. One, that we had no Republican support for the ethics reform whatsoever. And two, that there were really no good arguments against it. So I think that the Republicans are in a difficult place right now. I would hypothesize that many of the big donors that support the Republican Party are also the big donors that ran the operation that put these justices on the court. So it's hard to cross supporters of that magnitude. I do believe that we are perhaps 10% into understanding what has gone on at the court, that only the tip of the iceberg of misconduct has so far been disclosed. And I believe that if we are effective in pursuing the necessary investigations, and as more comes out from the Fourth Estate and the press digs into this, the more I think it's going to become untenable for Republicans to whistle by the graveyard and pretend there's nothing going on here. So I think there's a tipping point that comes as the evidence piles up and people agree, okay, we'll throw in the towel on defending these guys and we're going to try to figure out how to solve it for the institution.
Thank you.
All right, and last but not least, because the senators do have to jump at 1, is Ted Nesi from WPRI. There you go.
Let me just say I apologize. I'm going to have to jump off, Sheldon, but just to go
I
to.
was really looking forward to grilling you.
Yeah, exactly. I have some tough Connecticut questions for you, Senator, but okay.
Just to add to your comment in response to the last question, if Republicans are smart, they realize that what comes around goes around. If I have that saying right, that a president of a different party in a court where the same could happen, and it will happen soon because these guys are going to have to be off the court at some point soon by virtue of mortality. And a president who has 3 or 4 appointments, if it's a Democrat, the same kind of pendulum swinging could affect them as well. So I think this, it is neutral on its face, and you can game out the consequences in the short term, but in the long term, it is for the good of everyone, including both parties. So thank you. Thanks again, Sheldon.
Thanks, Dick. Ted, over to you. You're closing us out.
Yeah. Quick question / longer, and I'll give them both to you. The first is, does it applies to the Chief Justice as well as the Associate Justices?
Correct.
And second, is the split on the original jurisdiction and the appellate jurisdiction a sign that you think there might be validity to the constitutional concerns around term limits on the original jurisdiction?
Correct.
Easy enough. Thank you.
Okay, Senator Whitehouse, do you have any final words?
No, I just want to express my appreciation to all of the members who have joined me on this. The court's problems are an issue that is not going away. That issue is only going to become more acute as more gets discovered about the scope of the misconduct that has occurred. And I think it's important that we get ahead of it and take the steps that are necessary to protect the court at the moment from itself, but in the long run to protect it as an institution in which the American people can have robust confidence. Thanks, everyone.